Welcome to Marathon. May I help you?
Well, welcome to Action Church, and we're in a series about gratitude, and ironically enough, Thanksgiving is Thursday. So I just want to say, first of all, I'm grateful for that. I love the idea that we just take a Thursday off. That alone is awesome. There's not much good going on a Thursday except the next day is Friday. And so just the fact, just think about this, like how awesome is this? How grateful should we be that this Thursday, most of us at least, we'll take the day off. And it's totally socially acceptable to go, you know what, I'm just taking the day off from work and I'm just going to eat. In fact, I'm going to eat maybe twice, maybe 3 times even, and nobody's going to say, well, you can't just take the day off from work and eat. No, you can, because it's Thanksgiving. And it's also, and I don't know if you know this, but it is totally socially acceptable. You know how, like, if you're wearing a tie, it's okay, like, at the end of the day to start, like, unbutton that button and pull the tie down? Like, you can unbutton your pants on Thanksgiving, and it's totally cool. I don't know if you knew that. Like, totally socially acceptable. And as Marion said, your family's going to come over. Here's the great thing about Thanksgiving. Any other day of the year, like when your family comes over and your mom and your dad and your uncle, drunk Uncle Harold comes over, like all of those people, when they come to your house, like you generally need to remain upright in your chair and act like you're listening at least. But on Thanksgiving, because of the beauty of turkey, you can push the recliner button if you want and just fall asleep right in the middle of the day. I find, you go, it's Thanksgiving. This is one, you can take the day off Thursday, and this is the great thing, and just go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to eat. I'm going to watch football. I'm going to eat again. Like any other Thursday, like people are going to give you hassle about that and go, no, you're lazy. No. It's Thanksgiving. You can do that. It's totally, gravy is a vegetable on Thursday. It's just wonderful. And candied yams are a vegetable. Thanksgiving is awesome. And here's the thing about Thanksgiving that's great. Like, beyond all of that, beyond the football and the feasting and the questionable use of boxed wine, like Thanksgiving is awesome because we're actually taking that day to be grateful. And being grateful is great. It just is. And I'm not just saying that, but like, even if you're not a Bible person, even if you're not a God person, studies show. There's a study from Berkeley that showed that one of the top things to be happy in life doesn't matter what material possessions you have. In fact, people with less material possessions but more gratitude were actually happier people. And another study and this study goes on and on because you see this often and you know this, like one of the least attractive qualities that we find in others when we're rating that, like people we want to be around and people we don't want to be around, ungrateful shows up at, you can say it's the top or the bottom of the list. Anyway, we don't like being around ungrateful people. And so I actually put those things together and we just say around here that grateful people are happy people and people are happy to have grateful people around. Now, you already know that. As I said last week, you know that because of your Christmas list, right? Like we all have Christmas lists and if, it's almost a month away, not even a month away. We're going to get together and on Christmas, people are going to unwrap their presents and you're going to find this to be true, aren't you? You're going to find that the happiest people are the grateful people, and they're also the people that you want to be around. Is there anything worse? And you know this if you have kids, like kids are great when they're really little because they're grateful with whatever you give them. They don't ever say, well, that's the wrong brand or nobody likes that anymore, Dad. It's like little kids are super grateful and they're super happy on Christmas and they're so much fun. You actually want to be around them. As they get older sometimes, and teenagers, please listen to me. Your parents will like to give you things more if you at least fake being grateful because no one wants to be around, right? An ungrateful person on Christmas. Nothing worse than someone complaining about a gift they got. And so you know this to be true. And so I'm just thankful for Thanksgiving, not just because of the food and the family, but also just that we take time out to be more grateful and happier. Now, here's the remarkable thing. I was thinking about this, like this thing about gratitude, that we know it makes us happy, and we know that people like to be around grateful people, but do you realize, as Marion said earlier, some of us have had and are going to have bad Thanksgivings. Like this day, this magical day, can still go badly, right? Like there are things that can happen on Thanksgiving. I know like the Record family, our family, we're sort of notorious for this. I don't know why. Like we felt cursed for a few years because every Thanksgiving something major would break. We had like 3 Thanksgivings in a row that like a vehicle broke down so badly, like it was like rental cars and towing bills, and like I replaced a transmission over the Thanksgiving holiday. Like generally like automotively horrible things would happen to our family. And so it would kind of like ruin the Thanksgiving, you know, like I'm laying out there changing a transmission, or we're going, wow, we got a $2,000 repair. This is awesome. And I'm remembering other bad Thanksgivings we've had. I've been married almost 25 years, which is a miracle in itself, but we've been married almost 25 years. So out of 25 Thanksgivings, there was 2 what I want to call, and I've told this story before, septic tank Thanksgivings. Like I went to my parents in Missouri years ago, this is like 20 years ago, and I showed up at their house, and it was never a good sign when like my dad is in the front yard with a shovel, and he's like, septic tank's backed up, son, we're going to have to dig her out. You know, and I was like, no, really? And so, yeah, really. So we actually dug up the septic tank on Thanksgiving. My dad, because he is the man, put his arm down in that and cleared it out, and then we didn't let him carve the turkey that year. Now, last year, we actually went to their house in Missouri, true story, and I'm in the shower like 2 days before Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden I see the water start rising around my feet, and I'm like, you've got to be, and true enough, their septic tank backed up again, and we had to dig it out 2 days before Thanksgiving, and so I looked at my dad, and I'm like, every time I come to your house, your septic tank backs up, and he goes, I know, think about that, and anyway, like, touche, Dad, touche. Those are true stories. I mean, we've had like every sort of weird. I remember Marion said about fighting at Thanksgiving. We have one Thanksgiving I like to think of as the Fight Club Thanksgiving, like the true story. We had some friends come over for Thanksgiving, and they were always late. Like you have friends like that you know they're going to be late. So if they say they're here at 11, it's 11:30. If they say it's like 12, it's, you know. So we knew they'd be 30 minutes late. And Thanksgiving is the only day that Michelle and I cook together and actually coexist in the kitchen. But for some reason it works on Thanksgiving. It is a magical day after all. But anyway, we cooked and we like knew they'd be 30 minutes late. And oh no, they were 30 minutes after they're 30 minutes late. So like they're like an hour late and everything's like we have to choose between will this be cold or will this be dry? I mean, not good choices. And then somehow, like, instead of being angry at them, we got in a huge fight over it. Have you ever done that? Or, no, you haven't. You're looking at me like I have a horrible marriage. You're right. Like, but we were yelling at each other like, they're your friends. All of a sudden, they're your friends, you know? And I'm going, yeah, but you invited them. I didn't even want them here. And then you hear the doorbell ring and you realize they were outside. That's a true story. Like, we're like, did they hear? You know? And then, and then it was just so awkward because, like, have you ever noticed, like, when mom and dad have the fight and, like, you can feel it in the room? We were so angry at each other that everyone just sort of sat there at the table and ate, and we're, like, not sure if they heard. It was awful. That was the fighting. And then we had one year, and this happened just a few years ago, like, our oven went out on Thanksgiving morning, and I tried to fix it as usual. I was like, well, I can, and I didn't realize, like, that to turn an oven completely off, you have to hit the breaker. This little extra for you because it's 220. And so I'm working on it with it turned off, but I didn't realize the power was still on. I created this fireball larger than a turkey, and the screwdriver in my hand, I threw like a throwing star across the room and almost killed my father-in-law. True story. Like, so we have had bad Thanksgivings, truly. Like, that's just and we've been broke a lot of Thanksgivings. I look back and go, like, the Thanksgivings where you're like, oh, we can't really enjoy Thanksgiving because we're so broke. And I mean, and then there's a time, like, I was trying to scare Chandler and I put a turkey on my head. No, that's Friends. I don't know. That didn't actually happen. But, like, there's been some bad Thanksgivings, honestly. But here's the thing I realized looking back. Like, all the things I tell you from our life, like, that was a bad Thanksgiving, honestly, not really. In fact, a lot of them are just great stories now. Like, truthfully, and we talked about this last week, but it's still true, like, just naturally, all of us, you know, things that eat away at our gratitude every day, even if things are okay, are just like we all have self-interest. We all sort of compare ourselves with others. And over time, we just become less grateful. So when I look back at those stories, you know, honestly, it seemed terrible when our car broke down, but we were able to fix it, you know, and we would compare our lives with others, and I go, bet their stove never went out on Thanksgiving, you know, but that's not true. Like, everybody has problems, you know, and I look back and I think, like, most of those bad Thanksgivings, you know, were really just stuff that happens in life, right? It really was a day we should have been more grateful on that day because it's just stuff that happens. And in fact, I believe, looking back, that most of those things, just this verse that we talked about last week would have cured most of that. Just not thinking just about ourselves, oh, we're having a bad day, or our oven went out, or our car broke down, or we're a little tight this year on money, or, we got to dig up the septic tank again. Well, that's not normal. That's my family. But really when you start to think about others, it changes most of that, doesn't it? And I loved, honestly, thank you, Action Church, for putting this into practice. I didn't realize how awkward it was going to be, and I love this part of it, that everyone was carrying like 8 rolls of toilet paper into the movies. And you realize, guys, and I tell you this after you did it, the people that were just going to the movies this morning, they were talking about you, right? What's with these people? Is there something I don't know about this movie? I don't know. But thank you for thinking about others. Somebody just got that. But thank you. You're thinking about others, and you're thinking about people who would actually be grateful to have extra paper products in their house, because they can't quite cover that this week because things are tight. And so thank you for doing that. And thank you for the gift cards. And honestly, we're going to give you one last opportunity. If you missed it, run down to Wise and make that happen today, because it's the last day of that. Now, here's the thing about that. I think that works, doesn't it? Isn't it amazing? Just buying, I'm never happy about buying toilet paper, but when you're buying it for someone else, when you're thinking about their needs and going, hey, this might help someone. This might actually make their week a little better because they don't have enough, or paper towels. I don't think about that. But here's the thing. I think it's sort of like the Anchorman quote about the cologne. 60% of the time it works every time it's tried, because there are things, quite honestly, there are things that this doesn't fix. There are times that just thinking of others, just sort of getting our eyes off ourselves, always a good thing, of not being just self-interested, but thinking of others, of not comparing ourselves with others, not going, oh, we're better or we're worse. And those things are really helpful. And I stand behind what we talked about last week. If we'll do that most of the time, most of the time, that's a big help. It really is. But you know what? And we just need to deal with this today. There's one thing that really honestly doesn't help with. See, there's one thing that could happen on Thanksgiving morning. There's one thing that even if you're not sort of just thinking of yourself, you wake up and you're unhappy. There's one thing that can happen, and it can happen to any of us. There's one thing that just sort of saps our gratitude and makes it impossible to be grateful even though we know we should. And honestly, there's one thing that makes us cynical, right? And I know maybe some of you are in that one thing right now, and you thought these things, and don't feel bad about it, because I've thought the same thing. Oh yeah, Don, grateful people are happy people, but guess what? I'd be more grateful if I was happy this morning. I'm unhappy, and I have good reason to be unhappy. And if you knew my story, you would understand why I'm unhappy, and it's just impossible to be grateful because I've got this thing going on. See, we all have one thing at one time or another. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you're dealing with the one thing. We're going to talk about what that one thing is now. Some of you are, and some of you aren't, but I'm going to ask you to do what we talked about last week. If you're not dealing with this one thing, I want you to think about others and also realize this one thing might happen to you, and then you're prepared. And so even if this is not you, I just want you to think, here's the one thing. The one thing is different for everyone. The one thing is the one thing you think of first thing in the morning. Have you ever had that thing? You wake up, let's say we wake up on Thanksgiving morning, but honestly, this is any morning, and you go, oh, wow, it just hits you, right? You don't even have to think. You just go, oh, I'd be happy today, except she left. Or I'd be happy this morning if only I wasn't going bankrupt or had to declare bankruptcy. Or I'd be happy this morning if she was alive still, but we lost her and she's gone and nothing's going to change that. And so that hit me first thing in the morning. And see, I understand that because each of us have that one thing at some time or another in our life. And maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's a job loss. Maybe it's a child that's just broken your heart, or even worse, God forbid, like something's happened to your child, and you wake up in the morning and it's the first thing you think of and you can't put it out of your mind, and you're like, if somehow this thing wasn't happen, if this one thing wasn't there, then maybe I'd be happy, then maybe I'd be able to be grateful, then maybe I'd be better. But the truth is, there's this one thing. And I was thinking this week, and at first I laughed because I'm heartless and stupid, but like I was reading about the girl marrying Charles Manson. I like to call him Chuck. And at first I kind of laughed. I was like, dude, he's getting married, like how does that happen? I was just like 1,000 jokes, and I was like, oh, and then I realized like that's somebody's daughter. Like someone is waking up Thanksgiving morning going, daughter's getting married to Charles Manson. I hope he's not here for dinner because this is going to be a problem. Like I was thinking, like honestly, like that family. How do you deal with Chuck? You thought your family was awkward coming over for Thanksgiving. Their daughter is marrying Charles Manson. You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't it amazing? Like, there's just one thing. And you know what? I'm not going to try to talk you out of that one thing, because I just want to say that I understand that one thing is real. Marion talked about Thanksgiving 2012. I remember Thanksgiving 2012. It was awful. And I'm not trying to one-up Marion. In fact, we didn't tell you about this time, but I remember Thanksgiving 2012 because you guys, some of you knew Michelle's father, Phil. He was around here all the time. He was the guy that yelled at us when we leaned things against the truck, which I loved, and we really miss him, but he passed away last year. But Thanksgiving 2012 was sort of in the middle of his fight with ALS. And to be honest, that year was a rough year for our family. My wife is such a great daughter, and the fact that she had cared for her father he had cancer surgery, he had open heart surgery, and then honestly, he moved to be close to us. He bought a house just down the road from us, thankfully, and his idea was like, all of those things are in the past, and now I'll just, retire and spend time with my granddaughter, and we were excited about that. And then he started having trouble walking, and we thought it was a busted knee, but it turned out to be ALS. And so I remember Thanksgiving 2012 very clearly, and the reason why is because we knew that he was getting bad that year. And we'd even talked among ourselves, we'd had these discussions with him and my wife and I, and said, at some point he's going to need round-the-clock care. And we decided that we were going to sort of remodel our house a little bit and move him in with us in his final day. So we had a plan. But our plan sort of went out the window in November of 2012. Like over a period of a couple days, we realized not only were we not going to be able to wait and do work to our house, we weren't going to be able to move him in with us. We realized he needed round-the-clock care instantly. We realized like he was progressing so fast that we were just going to have to be there. And so the week before Thanksgiving, in the middle of a wonderful flu outbreak in our family, we moved into his much smaller home to care for him. Now, I don't tell you that so you feel sorry for us. In fact, I didn't tell you at the time. And here's the thing I know from that. Like when you're going through the one thing, I look around this room and I don't know all of you, and some of you I do, but I know you probably don't even tell others when you're dealing with that one thing, because it's just natural. We just go, hey, nobody can help us in this situation, but there's one thing that's so big. One thing that's so massive that it just sort of, it hits me first thing when I wake up, and that was our family. That was one of the roughest Thanksgivings because we were like living out of a suitcase at his home. He couldn't eat, and it was just, I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but it was an awful thing. And it wasn't something I could fix by just thinking of others. It wasn't something I could just go, hey, this isn't so bad if I think about it. It was just that one thing that just sort of kicked you in the stomach. And you said, if this one thing wasn't there, maybe I'd be happy. Maybe I could be more grateful, but I don't feel it right now. And so I just think that you've been through that. In fact, I think a lot of you have dealt with that one thing. And so here's what I want to do this morning. I don't have the answers for dealing with the one thing. I really don't. But I know two good sermons that I've heard in my life, and I want to share them with you this morning. Can we recycle sermons around here? I think we can. I think we're green like that because I don't have anything to say that could help you, but I've heard two really, really, really good sermons, and one is by the Apostle Paul. That's not going to shock many of you. It's from Philippians, where we were last week. It's a little further along. And another one's by a guy you don't know. His name, I still call him Pastor Gary Brothers, but my pastor back in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, the pastor that Michelle and I first started going to that church. It was an Assembly of God church. And the cool thing about Pastor Gary is the sermon that I remember, and this is amazing, was I checked my old Bible. People actually used to have paper Bibles. It was weird, but I had a paper Bible, and in it I wrote the date, and it was 1989. It was like Taylor Swift world when I wrote down and it still works. Apostle Paul, a little older, but I just want to share these two things with you. Because if you're dealing with the one thing like we were a couple years ago, or you're dealing with it now, or in the future if you deal with it, I want you to have this sort of ammunition to defeat this one thing. And here's what Paul said, and this is so smart and so helpful. He says this, and it's very short. We're just going to read through it together. Philippians 4:6-8 says, "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. And tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus." And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Here's the one thing that Paul said. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Now, here's the thing that's amazing that I took away from this, and I thought about this a lot when we were kind of in our one thing year. It says, tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. Now, what that means is just really pretty incredible to think about, is you and I, when we're in the one thing, when that one thing is happening that breaks our heart, kicks us in the stomach, and just steals our gratitude, we go, I'd be thankful if, but what Paul said is thank him for the things he has done, even when we still have needs. Because you and I often, and I know I often think like, God, if you'd fix this one thing, then I'd thank you. But the truth is, there are things, and this is what Paul taught, and this is true, that we can give thanks for even when we still have needs, even when God still hasn't answered all our prayers, even when in the end we find that he's not going to answer our prayers. When we find that the answer is we're going to go through this horrible thing. And he said something else, and this is so powerful. And this, honestly, if you get nothing else today, I think this is worth the price of admission that you didn't pay. Honestly, it's like, this is amazing, because what he says is you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything you can understand. Now, what a great way to put that, because it's exactly as it sounds. Like, you can have peace when you don't have happiness. You can have peace when everything's falling apart. You can have peace when you don't know how you're going to get up the next day and do it again. And we've experienced that as a family. And those of us who have walked through those one thing situations, those times when everything's falling apart, the amazing thing about God is not that he comes in and magically fixes it, but somehow, and it says you can't describe it, I can't describe it, but you're still okay. To wake up in the morning and go, this is everything that I'm dealing with is awful, but somehow I feel at peace. Somehow I feel this indescribable feeling that this is all okay, that God is still in control. And that's what Paul promised, and it's just true. And then he says something else that I think is so powerful. He says his peace, you know what it'll do? It'll guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Think about what that means, gang. I mean, what it means is that you can keep your faith through awful experiences if you follow this pattern. I mean, because a lot of people lose their faith, right? Like that's what our friends tell us when they go, I used to have faith, and then what? This one thing happened. Like I used to have faith and then she died anyway, even though I prayed, or I used to have faith and my kid got sick, or I used to have faith and then I got sick, or I used to have faith and then I lost, like again and again and again, we hear that one thing that made them think, well, God's not real and God can't help me. And instead what Paul said is if we remain thankful during that, not only will we be happier, not only are we more pleasant to be around, but God's peace comes and fills our heart. And instead of destroying our faith, then that one thing, I tell you this morning that some of the worst situations I've ever faced in our family, that somehow, I don't even know how, like built my faith instead of destroying my faith. And that's the part where he said, his peace, it guards your hearts. Like it guards you, like you could lose faith right now, but because this peace is in you that you can't explain and you're still grateful, even though you're not happy, it guards your heart. Now, Paul gets really practical, and I love this. And I also love that he says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. And then he says, fix your thoughts. And I know he means place your thoughts, but honestly, this is how to fix your thoughts. I mean, it's amazing what he says. He says, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable, and think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And I just want you to just think with me a little bit. Like, isn't this the opposite of how we think when we're in the one thing? Like, isn't it amazing? And it's hard to see this in the mirror, but I'm just telling you it's true, and I've experienced this. We tell ourselves lies when we're in that one thing. You know, we say words like, I'll never be happy again. I'll never get through this. I'll never feel safe again. I'll never be able to trust God again. And all of those things are lies, but we say them over and over and over, and we think about this one thing that just breaks our heart. And Paul said to do the opposite. He said, think about things that are true. And it's hard to do when you're in that one thing. It really is, because you want to tell yourself lies even. And I don't think it's just you. I don't see like a demon hiding behind every corner, but I know that our enemy loves to come against us and remind us like, oh, you'll never be happy. God can't handle this. You're never going to feel close to God again. You're never going to be grateful again. You're never going to have a relationship again. You're never going to have the, and none of those things are true. And so Paul said to think on things that are true. Think on things that are honorable and right and pure. Not the one thing that we want to think about somehow, like we go, I don't ever want to think about that again, but we do over and over and over and over and all day long. And it just destroys our gratitude, and it sucks the life out of us, and it makes us incredibly unhappy. And instead, Paul gives us all of these other choices of things to think of, like a checklist of things to think of, even when we're in that one thing. And I tell you, the amazing thing is when I would think about this verse and think about it, and this was a great help to me during the time when Michelle's dad was sick and we were caring for him, like, I'm not telling you like we were happy. We weren't. I'm not even telling you it was easy to feel grateful, because it sucked. But I'm telling you that there were things that were lovely. There were things that were true. There were things that were excellent. And I mean, there were things that were happening during that almost a year that were good. And it was so hard to focus on them, but I realized when we focused on those things instead of the one thing. Now, that's what Paul said. Paul's awesome. But I just want to share with you what Pastor Gary Brothers said in 1989. And the amazing thing is I can't remember anything. Like, that's 2 years after I graduated from high school. I think I was dropping out of college at that point, but I don't even remember. Like, that was still a lot of drinking during that time. But I do remember this, and that's what's amazing and why I want to share it to you, with you. He took this scripture, and he said these three things, and I still think of them today when I find myself in that spiral of thinking about the one thing that's bad. He said, accent the good, celebrate the excellent, and dismiss the bad. That's what Paul was saying. He's like, there are things, even in the worst situations, that are good. There's your kid who loves you. There's your wife who's wonderful and loves you. There's just amazing things going on all the time, even in the middle of the one thing, and we've got to accent them because naturally we're negative. We tend to go toward the negative pole of the magnet, and that's just the way human hearts are. But he says, accent the good, celebrate the excellent. And believe it or not, even in some of the worst years of our life, there were things that we should have celebrated. And we did try to go, hey, this is an amazing thing. This is awesome. We can celebrate the fact that our daughter's accomplished this, or we've been blessed in this way. Even in the middle of that. And it seems weird because you and I want to go, oh, I can't be thankful now. I can't be happy now because this one thing. No. Pastor Gary said it so well. And actually, I want to ask you to do this. If you think this will be helpful to you like it's been helpful to me, take a picture. I mean, I realize this is how we take notes now. Pull your phone out, take a picture of this, because this will help you when you're in trouble. I can do the gang signs if you'd like, but this is your unselfish. I know you're not used to doing the front camera, but it works actually. So I'd love you to take a picture of this if you think this will help you, and I believe it will. And see, here's the thing. I know, like this morning, a week away from Thanksgiving. And maybe you're not going through anything, and I'm just so glad you're here and your life is good, and that's great. But my guess is someday you're going to have one of those one thing experiences. And I don't wish that on you. I hope your life is awesome. But I got a feeling there'll be some day that we all experience death and loss. And so maybe you're thinking, and I don't blame you if you are, like, Don, that sounds kind of positive thinking, and I'm not a Bible person. I'm not sure about this Paul that you talk about. You know, it's nice that you're into Jesus, you're into Paul, but I just want to have a Thanksgiving day. You know, like I believe, and I know what some of you are even thinking, going, I believe in the separation of church and state, so I just want to have a holiday off from work, and I just want to eat turkey and unbutton my pants and watch TV and eat pie for breakfast, which is what I'm going to do. And so I know, like, a lot of you are thinking, well, that's nice to talk about in church, but I just want to have a regular Thanksgiving. And honestly, Don, you don't know my one thing. And I'll just be honest with you, like I've shared a little about my life, but honestly, you probably are dealing with something worse. Like some of you, and you haven't told anyone, but you're like, you don't know my story. If you knew my story, you wouldn't be grateful. And I get that. Because all of us think like that when there's that one thing, that one terrible thing happening in our life that we think of first when we wake up, that we just can't shake, that just kicks us in the stomach, we think, well, I can't possibly be grateful now. I'd be grateful if this weren't happening. I'd be grateful if God would fix this, but I can't be. And so I just want to have Thanksgiving, and I don't want to think about it. And so I have one more thing for you. And this is I'm going to read you something from a guy named William Seward. I don't know if you've heard of him, probably not. I'll give you a hint. He was Secretary of State at some point. And you've probably depending on when you went to school, I know they change this every year, maybe you've heard the story of the first Thanksgiving as the story of pilgrims, and I want to say Indians, but I think that's wrong now. I don't know why, but like pilgrims and the other guys who were, I don't even know what to call them now. Apparently, I can't call them the Indian word. So, but anyway, like maybe you've heard that story. That's not the story I'm talking about. That's really not why we celebrate Thanksgiving. It's a good story. I'm glad it happened. Or maybe you've heard that George Washington started Thanksgiving. George Washington had a Thanksgiving declaration. That's also true, but that's not the reason why we celebrate Thanksgiving in America. George Washington, after the Revolutionary War, did gather the people together to have a Thanksgiving celebration. It went on for a few years and then was sort of forgotten, as all of us do. I mean, you talk about time, self-interest, and just comparison. Over time, they forgot about Thanksgiving. Now, the Thanksgiving we actually celebrate comes from 1863. And William Seward was the Secretary of State who wrote the Thanksgiving Declaration for a president that you've probably heard of, Abraham Lincoln. And a little bit of trivia this morning, if you feel like you never learned anything at Action Church, Abraham Lincoln was actually inspired by a lady named Josepha, I think her last name was Sangler, who wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb. And she, seriously, this is a true story. Mary had a little lamb, and she wrote a series of op-eds and papers that talked about the need to gather the nation together for Thanksgiving in the middle of one thing. I mean, you think about you and I have one thing that sort of kicks the gratitude right out of us, one thing that keeps us from being grateful. The first Thanksgiving in 1863, the Thanksgiving that we still celebrate, happened in the middle of the Civil War. Happened in 1863 is, if you've ever been to the Gettysburg Park, where 51,000 men lost their lives at the Gettysburg battlefields, and this happened after that, a few months after that. So as I read this week, I thought, oh my goodness, like you and I think, well, we can't be happy, we can't be grateful, we can't really give thanks because of this one thing, but the truth is, the very first Thanksgiving happened right in the middle of, if you could think of an excuse not to be thankful, I would have to think it was the Civil War, right? A time when our nation was fighting against itself, when I think 620 to 850,000 people lost their lives. In a country of that size, back then, everyone knew someone who had died. in the Civil War, and yet I want to read this. I want to read this to you, and it's weird, like it's written in English, which we don't understand English anymore. I'm going to transmit it. I'm going to translate it into redneck, and then you can translate it into real talk, whatever that is that you do. But I just want to read this, and I want you to think about like the first Thanksgiving, what they declared that we should be thankful for in light of the fact that it was in the middle of the Civil War. It says, the year that is drawing toward its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come, others have been added, which we are of such extraordinary a nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and soften even the heart, which is habitually insensible to the ever watchful providence of Almighty God. I mean, I was reading this and I was like, in the middle of the Civil War, he's saying there's so much to be grateful for and we can't overlook it. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states to invite and to provoke their aggression, peace has been preserved with all nations, order has been maintained, the laws have been respected and obeyed, and harmony has prevailed everywhere except in the theater of military conflict. Talk about accent the good, celebrate the excellent, and dismiss the bad. He's saying, at least we're just fighting with each other and no other foreign states have come in to join in I mean, really, that's what he's saying, like, because at any point, England or France could have jumped in like they did in the Revolutionary War, and it would have been over. We might have been speaking Southern right now. I could have been on the right side had that happened. I mean, think about that. Like, any other nation could have jumped in, and this guy is going, we're thankful that it's just us killing each other, and that's just amazing to me to think of. And it said, needful diversions of wealth and of strength from the fields of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. And the axe had enlarged the borders of our settlements, and the mines, as well as iron and coal of precious metals, have yielded even more abundantly. Therefore, he's saying, you know what? And the country was broke at the time. I mean, if you want to get broke, like fight each other inside a country. You know that if you've been through a divorce. I mean, that's just the real deal. Like, and he's saying, but still, it's okay. We're still prosperous. We're still surviving. I mean, talk about extending the positive. It's crazy to think that we would even celebrate Thanksgiving at that time. And think about this in light of the fact that almost 1 million people died. He said, population has steadily increased, notwithstanding the waste that has been made in the camp, the siege, and the battlefield. And the country, rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance of years with large increase of freedom. No human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who, while dealing with us in anger for our sins, have nevertheless remembered mercy. It has seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and voice by the whole American people. I do therefore invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, and also those who are at sea and those who are sojourning in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent, I can't say that word, this is English, I don't read English, who dwelleth in the heavens. I want the band to come back up here, but I want you to think about that. Like that, I feel like Charlie Brown reading that to you, or Linus, but like that is the real reason we celebrate Thanksgiving today. Not because things were perfect and they gathered together, go, woo, things are sweet, let's celebrate. They were like, in spite of the one thing, there are things that we can still be grateful for. In spite of this huge one thing, in spite of the fact that, every one of us knows someone who's died, in spite of the fact this war is ripping our country apart, it could be worse. There are things that we can be thankful for. And so I just want to leave you with this. And I don't know where you're at in life. I really don't. Like, I hope things are sweet. But no matter what, I just want to leave you with this idea. And I think this is the true idea that Thanksgiving was started for. Don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything that we can understand. Dear Jesus, Thank you that we can experience that peace. Thank you that that's real. And God, I'm just praying for this crowd. I don't know where everyone's at. I don't even know everybody in this room. And I know the truth is, even if I did know everyone in this room, there are people that would deal with just horrible things and tell no one, because I would do the same. But God, I know that you know everyone in this room. And I know that you have peace if they will follow you, if they will turn their heart and lives over to you. I know that you have peace in the middle of this just horrible one thing. And so, God, I pray your blessing on all of our people over this Thanksgiving. God, I pray that they would be generous. I pray that they would be kind. And I pray that they would be grateful whether or not they are dealing with happiness or unhappy times. But most of all, God, I just pray that your peace, your amazing peace, would be on them. In your name we pray. Amen.